G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League with the AFL Fantasy Podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We look at the lesser knowns and the lower players that are going to be the point of difference in your Keeper Leagues. As per usual, I'm joined by my co-host Kaes. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Just keeping cool in this Adelaide heat wave that we're just starting on, actually. Yeah, 40 degrees today. We've got 4 successive days of 40.
With a few Uradler drafts to keep us cool.
Just a lovely, easy-to-drink beer in warm weather. So thanks to Uradler, even though they're not sponsoring us. But
they could if they wanted to.
Exactly. Just a bit of a shout-out to a great local South Australian craft brew.
We always support local beers here on the Keep League anyway. So what are we doing this week, Kaes?
We are going through all the position changes that are happening for 2020. So we've got a bit of a sneak peek into what the AFL fantasy positions will be for next season. Obviously, we're not sure what Ultimate Footy will come out for next year when they usually add on another couple, 20 or so usually historically. So, but these are the ones that are coming through from AFL fantasy, and there's some interesting ones, especially for the guys that we talk about week in, week out, getting some DPPs and stuff like that. So very exciting.
All right, with that said, let's dive into it and take a look. All right, cool. Let's have a start. So what we've done is we are going to basically have a look at some of the ones that are relevant. So we can't go through them all, obviously. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because there's just too many to go through. So we've picked a few that are going to be, we think, going to be more relevant to keeper leagues and guys that might be available in the draft pool next season. So, Kaes, who's first?
It's your boy, well, my boy, but you've stolen him for this this segment. Chase Jones from the LA Crows. So we are going down club order descending. So kick us off with Chase Jones, Heff. What do you know about him?
Yeah, well, I know a few things about him, but he played a few games last year. I think it was 8 games in total, but mainly as a forward. But the thing is, this year they've been, I guess in this preseason, Adelaide Crows have been saying that he's going to play more in the midfield this season, or going to get given a run in the midfield anyway. So, yeah, he only averaged 46 last year, but he had a big 92 in the last game versus Western Bulldogs. And if we look back to his underage scoring, which I always think is a good indicator of, fantasy potential, he had 97 average in the underage championships, and his point per minute was through the roof in that game. So his scoring was quite good there. So I reckon that's a pretty handy to retain forward status. Or did he have it last year? I think it was midfield only last year.
Yeah.
Played forward last year, that's right. So that's why he's got the forward status. But now going forward, I think if he gets more run in the midfield, he's going to be pretty handy.
Yeah, definitely. He's one I've had my eye on kind of since that big game in the last round last season. He was putting up some really good SANFL numbers before that. Got his chance in it was basically a do or die game for the Crows and actually played pretty well. So I think that with those guys, your Ellis Yeomans, Greenwoods, Douglas's, Betts, Jenkins to an extent, there's just so many opportunities for the next level of kids to come through.
Yep.
He's leading that pack obviously with Ned McHenry, and a guy I'm going to speak about right now, which is my boy Benny Kaes.
Oh, fuck me.
One of the great pickups of the trade period, well, not even trade period, the draft period. So he was a mid only last year, but he absolutely dominated the NEAFL and has been given forward status for 2020. Now, look, I know you want to be down on him, and that's fine. Really, his AFL numbers haven't been amazing, but what I do like, he's going to a club where there's going to be opportunity. So, as I mentioned, all those guys that have left the Crows, they're going to have to look for some guys to step up, and I think that, yes, Wild Jones and McHenry and potentially Gallucci, a few others, have been there for a year and a bit longer, they might be the first ones off the rank. But, Kaes is into his 4th or 5th season of footy now, so he's got that bigger body. He's kicked a heap of goals in the NEAFL last year. He's worked on his forward craft, can play midfield. I just think there's something about him.
When he inevitably flops this year, is this going to be the last year that you talk about him?
Well, yeah, because you'll probably get delisted. He's a rookie. So,
yeah, hopefully.
But look, if you look, he actually had 8, I know it's the NEAFL, but he had 8 times last season playing as a half-forward flanker, which is pretty good. He kicked a heap of goals. So, bit of respect. The Crows wouldn't have taken a flyer on him for no reason. There's obviously some kind of thinking, with how they're structured. They could have gone with, youth inside the SNFL, and they've picked out Kaes and Ben Crocker, and I just think that he's a bit of a step ahead of some of the other kids.
I just can't see him kicking those goals in AFL.
There's midfield time at the Crows available, and someone's going to put their hand up.
All right, moving on.
Yes, it's your boy Sam Petrevski-Seton, Heff.
All right, so next season, Sam Petrevski-Seton gains back status. So he was a forward last season, it goes from the previous season, but he pretty much played in defence the whole year last year. So, finally got that back status. Oh, but he couldn't get it because he was a mid forward. That's why.
Forward.
So anyway, he averaged 78 last season, and he only had a 26 in the last game against Geelong, where he barely touched the thing. So, if it weren't for that game, he probably would have been closer to the 80 mark, which would make that average look a little bit more respectable. Now, you think he'll be being kept in most leagues, but he might not have been picked up in last year's draft because it was a bit raw and probably the breakout wasn't as expected. So. Last season, he played 22 games and only 6 were under 70, but he only had 1 ton as well. So he had 8 games where he scored 80 plus. So that's really consistent scoring in there. Like we always talk about how much we love those guys that don't go under, 70, whatever, very often. So you're going to get a decent score on the park for you. The big question is, though, with Doherty coming back, is that going to affect him?
Well, he's not back yet. This was basically the time of year when Doherty went down, with his knee again.
Yeah,
so,
touch wood.
Unfortunately, touch wood, we saw Aaron Nitschke from Melbourne have his second ACL tear in the same year. So, yes, Doherty's entrance back into the club will obviously hamper a few guys, but I think what Petrevski-Seton does, and it's a good user of the ball, so they want the ball in his hands, plays it smart. You've got to think that Dale Thomas has been moved on there too, so, even if Doherty comes back in, he's almost taking Daisy's spot. So, but from in terms of what I like about SPS is that it was just that level. Like as we talked about, we banged on about it all last season, really, about he just doesn't have bad games. So while he was a centre forward, and there's probably a few more higher scoring options that you could pick up willy-nilly from the forwards, a guy who's got back status and really never goes under 70 is just pure gold for your side. So definitely one I'd be looking at, and there's always scope, for him to go bigger and better into the future too. So pretty exciting getting back status, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be good for the game. I think just a few more defenders in there as well because, we're running low each year.
We are. Next up, another Carlton boy, Heff. Who you got?
Liam Stocker's the next one we'll talk about. So he gains back status. I think he played 5 games last year and it was all pretty much in the back pocket. 45 average last season, and Carlton just purely wanted to get games into him, but I don't think he could quite hack it at AFL level just yet. He was probably a little bit underdone. He was highly touted in the 2018 draft with the infamous pick swap, I guess, with the Adelaide Crows to get him. They go with the first round pick this year to grab him, so interesting stuff there. He averaged 82 in the NAB League in 2018, but he had better Supercoach numbers as a junior. I think he was about the 100 average as a Supercoach. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because I think he's going to be more of a Supercoach type, I think, going forward, more so than an AFL fantasy type. What do you think, Kaes?
He was interesting to watch last year. I think his body just wasn't up to it, like size-wise.
He was small.
And that he just looked small out there and just looked not ready for that level. And that's, some people take that time to develop. I think because of the name he had, that they wanted to kind of get him out there and going, we made the right decision by trading our first pick and getting some game into him. Will this year be his year? I don't think so. I still think he's probably got another year before he becomes a real fantasy player, I think. So I wouldn't be too harsh on judging him in 2020, but it'd be very interesting to watch. And look, those guys who you might want to just kind of bring into your side just on the off chance that they do go up to the next level, him having back status is just perfect and makes it a bit more worthwhile taking a risk on him. Yeah,
he's on my list, and at this point in time, it looks like he's going to be put back to the pool because we can only keep 16. But disappointing because if we could play a dynasty or something, he'd be someone I would hold on to just to have a look at. But the immediate scoring is probably not going to be enough. It's probably going to take another couple of years before he gets there.
I tend to agree. We're moving on.
It's rare.
Yeah. We're moving on to the Fremantle Footy Club, and you've got your boy, Adam Chera.
Yeah, a lot of my boys in here.
Amazing. You wrote the show, Doc.
All right. Adam Chera, he averaged 60 last season. Had one score above 100 last year, and that was in round 2. So we thought, I think he had a quiet first week, and we saw 100. Like, here we go. Here's Chera's breakout. Here it goes. But it just didn't eventuate from there. But last year, basically, I saw him as a natural midfielder, just having to play across half-back, kind of playing a role, filling that kind of hold until he kind of can work his way into that midfield position full-time. He had big numbers at junior level, so 99 at the Under-18 Championships and 115 in the NAB League the previous year. So hopefully a new coach puts him back in the midfield, but I can't see him scoring well in defence again, but I'd like to see him move back into the midfield and see how it goes.
Yeah, he looked pretty good in their back line actually last year at times. He was pretty composed and was doing some good things for a young bloke. He had that bad second year blues, really, basically. We thought he was probably a year ahead of the curve, but he just wasn't. But I think next year, basically if you with the back status, you can kind of go chips in a bit. If it's going to be his year, this is the year when you want to take him because it's the do or die year in terms of going ham.
I think if you've got him, you want to be holding on to him.
Definitely. With the talent that he's shown and back status, it'd be a very tough one to delist for sure.
All right, Kaes, who's up next?
His teammate Darcy Tucker. So kind of took us all a bit by surprise last year. He played every game for Freo, which was really good. He gets the forward edition this season, which I think makes him a real handy late pickup. So averaged 73 last season with 2 tons. But I kind of think that is his level. He's around that mid-70 average. I think he was used as a tagger a bit, played forward a bit. So pretty dynamic in what he was doing for the team. It's just how he's going to fit into their side next season, which kind of I'm not sure about. So obviously we'll see the rise of, your Brayshaws, Cherrers just naturally taking that next level step. But, on the flip side, you see Steve Hill, Bradley Hill leave, and Ed Langdon out.
Just on that, I don't see how he doesn't fit into the side. He's that straight into the wing for me.
Yeah, but then you've got Akers coming in. James Aish is going to come into that side.
James Aish is going to play on the wing. They've got 2 wing spots they got to fill.
Yeah,
and he's the next one in line.
Well, I think Akers will take one of them.
Well, there you go. There's one, but I reckon there's no chance of him not.
So, but you're not going to. Don't you want Cherry to come into the midfield there?
I'd like to, but I just don't see it happening. He's a pure winger.
And what about the draft boys that they brought in? These 3 hot draftees who are going to be.
We've got a halfback flanker. We got a small forward. And another small forward.
Are you a Freo supporter now?
No, I'm just saying, that's what we're analysing here.
Yeah, no, I just think that he's just going to be that same kind of role. But new coach, so who knows what's going to happen? That's the thing. So he's definitely holding his spot. He's not getting dropped from that best 22 because he was so valuable to their team last year. But can you see him going from a 70 average to a 85, 90 average? I don't think I can.
I think 80 plus, easy. Yeah, 85, we'll probably get there this year.
85?
Yeah, 80 to 85. Yeah, I can see that.
Cut this and we'll play it again next season. 85. We need a bet sheet or something like
80
that.
to 85,
okay.
but in that ballpark. But yeah, I think 73 average last year without a kind of defined wingman role, like you're competing with spots with Brad Hill and Langdon. With those guys gone, he jumped straight into that role, I find.
Maybe.
Anyway.
Heff, Greenwood.
All right. Hugh Greenwood, yes. Let's have a look at him. So he had, so basically last year he was named as a midfielder. He got forward status in Ultimate Footy and probably fantasy as well. I don't keep up with the AFL Fantasy Classic positions as much. But so we'd have fingers crossed he'd keep the forward status, and he did, so that's good. This just makes him become very fantasy relevant. So, well, initially it did, but we'll explain this later. But anyway, he averaged 78.3 last season. And that was his lowest average from his 3 seasons at AFL level. So if that's your lowest, you're not going too bad. He averaged 82 season prior, and that was his highest. And I think he averaged another 79 the year before that. If he plays as a forward, I reckon he'll average in the 70s. But if he plays as a midfielder, he'll probably average in the 80s. Now, what I'm thinking is now, at the start, when he first got traded to Gold Coast, I'll be like, yes, he's definitely in midfield next year, next bigger bodies, Look at all their draftees now that they've got to fit in, and and other trades and stuff they've made too. It's just going to be very hard to actually know who's going to be playing in that mid. So Gold Coast just have a lot of midfielders, but I guess with Greenwood, his tackle numbers are generally pretty good. So I think that's going to be the result, or I guess the cause of some of his scoring. So if he can keep those tackle numbers up, he should be good wherever he plays. But I'm not sure if I'm going to be as keen on those midfield numbers that I thought he'd be getting.
I just don't think his tackle numbers aren't going to drop because that's basically his game. But I do think that where Gold Coast are at with their list, you've got a lot of naturally talented guys coming through who are coming out from injury. Your my boys, your Jack Bowes, etc., who they probably want to push into the midfield. But Greenwood's strength is actually his pack marking, and he's actually a pretty good shot at goal. So wouldn't be surprised if they do use him as that half forward flanker as opposed to the centerman centerman player. You got to realise they got Brandon Ellis coming in there too. So they've got a few guys in there who probably ahead of the pecking order, I think, in their midfield. But I think his flexibility is good for the side. But I wouldn't be worried about his average dropping off, but whether it's going to go the other way and grow a lot, I'm not sure about that.
All right, Kaes, who's up next?
Daniel Howe. So the Hawthorn player gains back status and really probably needs it. So he only averaged 67 last season, which was coming off the back of averages of 77 and 75 the seasons before. My question is with him, while the back status is very handy, I'm just not really sure where he sits at Hawthorn either. So we're seeing that Tom Mitchell's coming back into the fold this year. He's going to start training in the new year. James Warple's on the rise. Obviously, he's gone bananas. But then you got like guys like James Cousins, Jack Scrimshaw, who are pretty handy. Utilities and that kind of thing too. Whereas Daniel Howe's been in that system a bit longer, hasn't really found his niche. Has tagged at times, but whether you can trust him to deliver week in week out, even as a backman, I'm not sure. For me, he's probably looking like a handy enough late pickup in a draft. You wouldn't definitely keep him, and you wouldn't take him too early. But just one you could throw a pick on late because he is around that best 22. And when he plays, he usually scores not too bad. So a bit of a wait and see one, see what the Hawthorn midfield's looking like in the preseason. But good that we've got another back in the fold, I think.
He's had too many chances for me. I wouldn't be going anywhere near him.
Wow. Another definitive statement from Heff tonight.
Yep.
Big calls at the end of 2019.
I think you'd find our listeners probably agree. Dan Howe is probably not really brought up in conversation, barely get his spot on the side. And when he does, he might have one good week out of 5 and then just stink it up for the other times.
Jeez, now we're talking about good players on this podcast. You've changed. My next one is...
It's not about talking about good players. It's trying to find potential, and I just don't see any potential there.
Yeah, but if it was your last pick, I'd be happy to take Dan Howe.
Yeah, sure. Your last 5 are generally shit anyway, so it doesn't matter.
My last 5 are usually good. It's my first 5 that are really bad. From Melbourne, Nathan Jones. So he's gone to defence. He's got a centre-back position this season. Basically, it's bad news, and I think Nathan Jones is officially dead. So he's gone from 104 to 87, and then this year, averaged 74. The interesting thing about that is you go, he's getting older, maybe he's not playing as much. He actually, his time on ground did not change over the last 3 seasons, and he's dropped 30 points per average, 30 point per game average, which is just crazy. So for me, I see him as a Jordan Lewis 2.0, and I really don't see any upside at all, especially with Adam Tomlinson coming in, who's that bigger body mid wingman, Ed Langdon arriving too. So for me, I'm going to make a big call. Just avoid at every single cost and don't get sucked in because he's got back status. People do get sucked in. A lot of people will get sucked in with Jordan Lewis getting it last season. It's just not worth it. He is gone. He's going to be a bit player in the team, and their new era of midfield will come through and be the scorers for them.
Yep, I agree with all of that. Just go for something, go for youth over him. Correct. Find something else.
Yep. One that is very exciting is a man by the name of Bailey Fritsch. So he has got forward and back status, so the DPP, which is super exciting, and I reckon he becomes one of the most important fantasy swingman for 2020. So what I like about him is he's actually dangerous whether he's forward or back, and I think that his development was definitely one of the most exciting things of Melbourne's season last year. What wasn't quite there was that full season consistency, but his back half of the season was absolutely awesome. So he's 23 years old, and I still think he's got a heap more to come. It'll only be his 3rd year of AFL footy, but holding that back forward just makes his fantasy value grow a bit, especially when backs can be a bit shaky at times, and so can forwards. So it's always super handy to have one of those forward back players where you can just swap in week and out if you've got a bit of an injury in one of the areas. So he kicks goals, he does it in defence, he can get touches. I think he's could be a real fantasy jet.
Yeah, the numbers don't tell the story, but when you look at him play, he looks like a fantasy baller. So I reckon another year under the belt, I know he's a mature age, but coming into his 3rd year. Yeah. I know it doesn't really count as much, but I reckon, with another year on his belt, I reckon he's only going to improve this season.
Agreed.
All right, let's take a look at Paul Ahern, another one of my boys. So he gains back status. So he played 3 games late last year. I think it was rounds 19, 20, 21, actually got it written down here. He scored 84, and 59. So he had a 75 average from his last 3. But I guess the issue is he only played 7 games, so he's struggling to cement that spot in the side. Under a new coach, it might be a different story, but the thing is we saw the coach take over last year and it didn't really affect things too much. So if he can cement his spot on the side, I think he's going to be a reasonable scorer, but Paul Ahern that is. But it's going to be hard for him to actually do that, I think. If he moves back into the midfield, which is what he was drafted at, what he played at, if he can do it, or cement his spot on the side and get back into that midfield this year, he's going to be a pretty handy pickup as a defender. But I don't know, can you see it happening, Kaes?
I just don't know about North Melbourne's midfield at all. They've got so many guys in and around it who are
But
just
what about their defence just getting a game? Do you think he can slot in there?
He could get they obviously have to go down a path, and youth is that path. He's still young, it's just where he slots into that side. I don't know, like Bonar comes in this season. Where's he going to play? Will Dom Tyson ever come back from the dead? Will Aaron Hall return? There's all these kind of bit players in North Melbourne's side that you just can't actually get an easy read on where guys will line up week to week. I don't think even Zerha or Zeeble or where are they going to play, forward, mid? Who knows? There's absolutely so many unknowns with North Melbourne. It's like a don't go zone for me.
Off topic, but Zerha is someone I'm actually pretty keen on.
Yeah, I'm very excited about him too. But
I can see him just slotting into Zeeble's role eventually.
I feel that those guys are just going to interchange from forward to mid.
They'll retire. It'll be fine.
Yeah, no. But that's my thing with North Melbourne. I just can't get a read on who's in their best 22 and where everyone lines up. Because it's like Jack Zeeble. 1 week he can play forward and score 20, and then next minute he goes in the midfield and scores 120. There's just no continuance. I don't even know what the word is. You just can't rate him. That's basically what it is.
Okay, let's move on to Sam Powell-Pepper from the Port Adelaide Power. So he has forward status this season. So this is a surprising one because if you look at his heat map, he looks very much a midfielder. So I didn't really see this one coming. I watch a lot of Port Adelaide football as well, and I didn't really notice him up forward that much last season, but he must have snuck up there. That said, you usually had a few froths going through, so I could have been blinded.
He was in the forward line the second half of the game, and you were blotto by then because you're down by 10 goals.
I just assumed he was in the back line, but I just forgot that they'd changed ends. But anyway.
This is what we're dealing with, guys.
He averaged 75 last season, so as a forward, I reckon that's going to be pretty handy. And I can see Port really putting emphasis on youth next season as well, so they'll be wanting to play in the midfield. I think he had some big games last year. I think he was late in the showdown last year and absolutely dominated in the midfield, but just couldn't cement that spot again. But yeah, I can see him becoming a high 70s, low 80s forward. The only thing is I don't think he'll maintain that forward status for very long.
Yeah, no. He probably saves himself being cut from a lot of keeper legs, keeping forward status.
Yep.
Especially because a lot of guys have lost their forward status who are big ballers and they're going to the midfield. So
sure.
I reckon if he wasn't a forward and if I had even my squad of 30 and I had 15 keepers, I wouldn't have kept him. But now you almost are obliged to because there's that chance that he can go into the midfield and score quite well. So I think you've got to stick fat with him if you are an SPP holder. And you're right. I think Port have to go for it and just invest in youth for the next year or two. And if he's not part of it, he's got to go to another club anyway. So interesting to see what happens with him next year.
All right, another Port Adelaide man, almost a forgotten man because of the broken leg last year. But Jack Watts, tell us something about him, Kaes.
Yeah, well, call me crazy, but I actually think that I'm a little bit excited about Jack Watts next year. So he played those 2 games for Port before he did break his leg, and he scored a 92 and a 67, and that was, I think he only played 3/4 of the game before he snapped his leg there. All reports he's been training very well and will be ready to resume in the Port backline for 2020. So what I liked about him in the pre-season and early on, he was just it was really intercepting well, like floating across, taking some grabs, kicking. Obviously, he's a great kick, so he had that responsibility a lot. Dan Houston moving into that midfield a lot more, I think will just free up guys like Burton and Watts to just float across that half-back line. We'll be able to sweep up there. And I just think he's going to be one of those set and forget 75 to 80 average defenders. No worries, week in, week out. Won't score 120s, etc. But you can just put him in as like a D3 to D5 and just lock and load and don't worry about him for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, I agree that mid-70s, maybe low 80s was what he will probably average next season. I think Port will just be keen to get the ball in his hands because he's actually a good user of the ball. So, I think they'll use him across halfback in that same role. And as long as he doesn't get injured, I think it'd be handy.
For sure. On to Richmond. Shane Edwards, he picked up back status this season, so he goes in as a DPP as a centre back, and he was obviously one of the best streamer options this season, but I reckon he kind of his relevancy grows having back status in 2020. So he went through 3 seasons of scores in the 60s, but this year, he averaged 74. And it was really that his late season form caught everyone's eye, and it was his role change as well. So he was spending a lot more time in the midfield, doing a few run with roles, obviously playing across halfback there too. So while I think there's almost like 2 points to this story, I think there's some relevancy there and some value in taking him as a centre back. but I also think there's a few warning signs at the same time. So you can't get too excited because he is 31, so he's getting on, and his role could change, like that. So it really depends on what the Richmond setup next year's like, whether he's going to, go through that midfield like he was in 2019 or go back to that, pressure forward that he was playing for the 3 years prior. So the good thing is, though, I think there might be a few coaches with rose-coloured glasses on with him who will either take him a lot earlier than he should go in drafts, or potentially think there's a bit more value if you do hold him. You might be able to get something for him. But if you're going, with that 30 team, 15 keeper kind of thing, I think he'd be a non-keeper. He's just on that borderline, just with his age and his role. Unsure with his role, I think.
Yeah, the other thing to think about, I guess, is Pickett coming into the side as well, which would play a pretty similar role. Someone like Jack Graham, that wasn't in the final side as well. Jack Ross is another one. Yeah, and there's a few others that I guess were injured for a lot of the season. So, yeah, it's just a wary one as to where he kind of plays. So, if he plays in the midfield and he's got that back status, it's going to be handy. But I wouldn't be surprised if he just goes back up forward and just, plays as that pressure forward.
There's a lot of risk in it for me, I think.
Yeah.
James Rowbottom from the Swans. So he has had forward addition here. So he's a centre forward. And I think takes him from a risky centre proposition to a guy I kind of want really badly. So he played 12 games last year in his first season in AFL, averaged 63. Did have 4 games of 77 plus, which is pretty good for a first-year player, and only played 67% time on ground too. So I think with what the Swans are doing, they're rejuvenating their list. Zach Jones has moved on, Kieran Jack's gone, Joe McVeigh's gone. They've got in some really good draftees. I think he's going to play a good majority of games in 2020. His body was big. He's a good size, tackles well. I think there's lots of ticks here. And just with the forward status, he's just someone you can take a bit more confidently than you would if he was a centre only for me.
Yeah, I haven't really followed him a lot or very closely before this season, but now that I know you want him, it's going to make draft night very interesting. So I might keep a closer eye and maybe just pick him just before one of your picks.
Round 1, James Rowbottom. Not much chop.
I won't be able to get it. Oh, actually, no, I do have a pick in front of you, but I don't think I'll take him there.
I'm going to win my bet.
Okay. All right. Now, contrary to, I guess, popular belief or what people are probably assuming right now, that Kaes actually made this list of players and it wasn't me, but here's another one of my boys that I'll talk about. And this guy, I'm not sure why he's on the list, Kaes, because he's probably going to be kept in most leagues and too good. But if you give me an opportunity to talk about Jordan Dawson, I'm going to talk about Jordan Dawson.
I'm just going to leave for a while. I'll come back in 5 minutes.
So Jordan Dawson has added forward status. So after being a mid only at the start of last year, he added back status halfway through the year. Actually, I think he added forward status in AFL Fantasy and back status in Ultimate Footy. So,
crazy.
Yeah, I guess they just had to pick one each. But now he's got the back forward this year. So I think now he is going to be the ultimate swingman in Ultimate Footy and Fantasy Football this season. So he had a breakout season, I guess, last year and averaged 82. He had 4 tons in that as well. And I guess a lot of those games he was playing in the midfield, and you've noticed when he was playing solely down back or solely up forward, he probably didn't score as well. But the thing is, when he goes in the midfield, he kind of just seems to pop up and he can do everything. So he's a player that you find he gets more of a run in the midfield, and we hope that's the case going forward. But I think just the back forward status gives him that little bit of extra flexibility. So if he plays that midfield role, he should go well. The downside is as well, and I'm a Jake Lloyd owner, when he plays in the defence, they kind of eat into each other's scoring a bit as well, which hurts. But it's just one thing to think about. But I think the back forward status is pretty handy.
Very handy. He's definitely one to watch. Obviously, everyone really knows that now. But with back forward status, just like Bailey Fritsch, they both can score well, and they're very handy acquisitions. So if you have him, keep him, and obviously value him because he's an absolute jet.
All right, Kaes. Bailey Smith, he's been given forward status.
He has. Very exciting. So, another one of your boys, really.
I like anyone who's a good junior fantasy scorer. So they're all my boys.
This is ridiculous.
I just like good players, Kaes.
I like shit players. Yeah. Come on down, Ben Kaes. So Bailey Smith averaged 69 in 2019, but came home with a wet sail, averaging 85 in his last 5 games. And I reckon he can do that basically every game in 2020. He was a just such a good player to watch. The way he goes about it, finds the footy easily, tackles well. Centre forward just makes him just a must draft if you're starting up a keeper league, or if you've got him, you'd be absolutely smiling. So he did ton up 108 against Port, which probably isn't that hard. But he did have 12 games of 75 plus, which is when you're playing half of he played a full season of footy, half of those games are, scores of 75 plus. That's really good for a first year player. So definitely will be gone in most leagues. But if you are starting one up, or you want to try and get him, off someone for an older player who might be going for a flag, you got to do it now.
Did you mention his time on ground numbers there, Kaes?
No, I didn't.
They were very, very low last year as well. So that scoring as well is off very little time on ground. And that comes on the back of being injured for majority of the year before. So really easing him into it. So I'm expecting big things from Bailey Smith, and a good fantasy scorer from what little footy he did play in his junior days. Played a lot last year, but didn't play the time on ground numbers he would like.
Yep.
So watch him going forward, because I think he's going to be pretty handy.
Now we've got to the end of the alphabet, and for some reason Andrew Brayshaw has just snuck in there.
Well, I know if you've left him off here, so I was wondering what is going on, because he's probably the most talked about guy in the fantasy circles right now.
You wrote the show doc and you just put him in.
These were your notes of the list of players that you made, and I noticed you missed
anyway,
Andrew Brayshaw.
I'll leave you for 5 minutes again. Let's go.
Oh no, I don't think it's it's pretty common news that he's been given forward status, and a lot of people are talking about him going forward, because a lot of people are expecting the breakout. So I thought it was pretty important that we talked about him.
It is, but if you think about it, from even from late last year, you go, geez, Chair and Brayshaw had bad years as centre onlys, and then you go, bang, one's got back, one's got forward. All of a sudden they come super, super relevant now. But it does mean that people want them a lot more than they potentially did when they only had the centre status.
Anyway, we'll talk about Brayshaw. He adds forward status, and as we said, he thinks he's primed for a breakout season. So he averaged 70 last season, or 69, high 60s. Had 2 tons real late in the year, and finished off the season with an 80 average from his last 5. So again, Hill and Langdon have left. He plays that inside role a bit more, so Akers is probably going to affect him as well coming in. But the new coach, and for large portions of the game last year, he was chucked up forward for quite a bit and out of that midfield, and that probably contributes to that kind of lower scoring, or that plateau in scoring. But I reckon next year he's ready to take that next step, and there should be a breakout.
Yeah, well, I've seen the Andrew Brayshaw trading down the house stories. So,
yeah, exactly. You can't argue with those stories.
You can't.
They're never wrong.
They are never wrong. Burning down the house, obviously, you got to take him. But even if you're playing, normal AFL fantasy, you got to have him now as a centre forward. If you're playing normal draft leagues, you got to have him, because he might even hold it for a year, but it'll be a very, very good year for you, I think.
All right, that's all the players we're going to talk about who have changed positions going into this season. Next up after the break, Kaes is going to talk about some of the players who have lost DPP, so stay tuned for that. All right, so Kaes has had a look at some of the players who have lost DPP, and he's going to highlight a few of those now. So, Kaes, Andrew McGrath, he's mid-only next season.
Rest in peace, Andrew. It was good knowing you as a fantasy proposition. Look, he averaged 75 last year. I just think he's poisoned this year, unless he's one of the 20 blokes at Essendon who are actually fit, if you believe all reports. I just don't think he has any trade value now. Yes, he could be a good player one year, but people would have wanted take that chance on him if he had back status. He doesn't have that anymore. But if you are saying that, maybe he goes in undervalued, so you could pinch him and win out of it in the long term. So a bit risky now. He just doesn't become, if you're averaging 75 as a mid, you're borderline being kept. Unless you're expecting a massive breakout. So the only thing that is good, as I said, is if he's one of those fit guys at Essendon, and he will be playing a lot of midfield time.
I think he's going to wind up like one of those mid-90s type midfielders that are good for your mid-4, mid-5, mid-3, maybe even if it depends how bad your team is. But I think he's going to be one of those players that you're going to have because you'll need those midfielders that kind of just plug out 90s each week.
But they're the ones that he's like David Swallow. It's like no one gets excited about David Swallow.
No, that's what I mean.
He's serviceable, but
he's going to be kept most years, but he's just not. There's no excitement there anymore.
Interesting one.
Mitch Robinson, what happened to him?
So he's a centre only now. So obviously a bit disappointing for Mitch Robinson owners, and probably hurts his trade value considering he's getting on a bit. But if you think about it, he still averaged 94 last year, which is a pretty good mid-keeper if you're looking at it that way. And he did go at a 108 average in his last 5 games last season. Can't see too much changing in the Brisbane side, really. They're rinse and repeat from last year. So he's going to play a similar role. So if you're expecting another 90, I think he's a keeper.
All right, and what about Will Setterfield?
Yeah, this one hurts a lot because as a centre only, I just wouldn't be surprised if he actually gets dropped off lots of lists. So as a centre forward, he had a bit of value last year, especially in leagues like ours where you're looking for that next breakout. Look, yes, he is apparently burning down the track.
Aren't they all?
They are. Well, Will Setterfield he's ripped and staunch and stuff, and going to help out Patrick Cripps, and they're going to be like Batman and Robin in the Carlton midfield. But
Awesome.
as a centre only, he's too risky to keep. I wouldn't be keeping him. And where do you take him in a draft, a redraft? You know, it's tough because you've got to kind of stockpile up your forwards and backs before you even look at these, you know, breakout kind of centres. So a tough one. He's lost value as an owner.
It depends where, like, you know, what your league setup is and all that sort of stuff. But he's probably going to be one of those mid-round picks when you're just chalking up your midfield and you're picking those guys that are going to play every week and you can rely on for a 70-odd, you know, here and there.
Yeah. Who's next? Jordan Clark. So he lost his back status and goes to centre only. So this really hurts his roster ability too. So he did show glimpses of being a good player last season, but at the end of the day, wasn't only a 63 average player. So I think with him, because there is a bit of upside, he's got class, he's going to play in that Geelong side for the next 10, 12 years. Because he's lost that back status, people are going to bump him down their list so far down, and I think you can draft him late on the off chance that either towards the end of this season he comes good, potentially picks up that back status again, or you know, grows into a really good player with an aging Geelong list and from 2021 can be one to watch.
Yeah, I'm big on Clark. I reckon he's a class kid and he's going to be a star going forward, I think. So, yeah, you know, use that 63 average to your advantage. Hopefully people look down on him for it and, snap him up.
Big time.
Now, Kaes, I did bring the tissues in, so I'm not sure you're prepared to talk about this next one.
It's been a tough night for me because you've talked about all your boys and the only boy I've talked about is Jack Bowes and he's lost back status, you know. So hopefully Ultimate give him back.
Didn't all your boys just get delisted anyway? Oh no, Ben Keys, got redrafted.
Yeah, so it's just like, he's like, what is it? He's like a phoenix rising from the ashes. So Jack Bowes lost back status, no surprises there. Average 71 last season. Look, he's going to be a hard sell for me to tell people to invest, but look, he had injury interrupted year last year. He came back towards the end of the season, which is great. Got a few games into him late. Full preseason this year. Should be good to go. I think that he's one of the guys, along with Ben Ainsworth, who Gold Coast are basically going to give the keys to the midfield. They can do a bit of damage with a few more experienced heads coming in around him. And I think that he's going to go to the next level this year. Just kind of breakout happened a year late.
I think I don't trust just with the Gold Coast midfield. It's stupidly competitive. It shouldn't be, but it is. And I just haven't seen enough glimpses of him playing consistent midfield football and scoring well. So for me, like, you're obviously keeping him if you've got him because you can't put a player with that sort of potential back. But if I'm looking at one of my redraft leagues, I don't go after him at all this year, I don't think.
Well, you're wrong.
Yeah, he's just not someone to pick up.
No, I'd be taking him because he's gonna. If you're even doing a year by year draft league or a starting keeper, I think that why wouldn't you take him late? No one else is going to take him
because where he's going to go, I think you could potentially get better positional players in those spots.
Potentially,
I think he's just going to go way before he should.
Well, I love him and I'm keeping him.
I know you do.
Harry Perryman is a centre only, so it probably hurts him a bit because he's progressing really nicely into a good player and someone, if he had back status, you'd be keeping for sure. I think you're going to be sticking fat with him. He's shown enough last year that he's going to be a very, very good player. Eventually, a few of those guys in the GWS midfield will slow down, which will give Perryman that chance to progress a bit more into there. End of the day, he's still going to be a pretty handy halfback flanker winger for him. So potentially
he's not going into that midfield.
Why not?
Because there's too many of them. Yeah, but I've made mention of it later down in one of the questions, but there's probably 5-6 midfielders. Yes, he'll get runs in there, but even when I watched him last season, when I watched someone I watched pretty closely, it didn't seem like he was anywhere near a full-time midfield role last year, and he somehow lost his back status. Yeah, no, I don't get it.
So what would you do?
I think he's going to get it back quite quickly. Okay. I don't think he's going to play that much.
You're talking round 3, round 6, whatever.
Yeah, I reckon you get it back quite early next season. So he's one.
So what would you do then if you had him?
Keep him, obviously.
Okay,
yeah, he's class.
Yeah. Okay. Cade Colajazny.
Spit it out.
Yeah, it's a hard word to say after a delicious Urala beer. He's lost back status and is a centre only, so that's a big lol. Don't draft him. Xavier Dersma, this one's got to hurt you. He's a centre only next year. So what do you do? I'll tell you what I'll do, then you tell me what you do because you're biased. So he's a 79 average midfielder with a lot of upside. He's going to be kept, isn't he?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
will he get back status, forward status?
No.
Nah, he's mid.
Yeah.
So you're just basically hoping he turns into a actual fantasy jet mid? Is that
He'll probably... No, I don't think he'll ever be that jet mid either. He'll probably regress this year, I think. The second year kind of blues will come into play. But I think he'll end up being one of those classic 95 average wingers, I reckon. I don't think he's going to ever be like a huge star.
So why keep him?
Well, because I think everyone's got 95 average mids.
Can you trade him for something?
Well,
no, because he's lost back status.
Yeah, exactly. But I think everyone's going to have, like I said, he's not going to be next year, but I think eventually at the peak of his game, he'll turn into one of those 95 average mids. Like, you've got worse mids in your side that you'll keep this year. Everyone 100%. Does. Everyone does.
I'm keeping Tom Cutler, man.
Exactly. So he's got to be kept.
Zach Jones, mid only. So came off a career best year with an 82 average. Moves clubs, which obviously makes his role interesting. For me, he's a real coin toss proposition. So really depends if you're backing him to move into their St Kilda backline, potentially get that back status back. Is he going to play full-time mid? Is he going to progress? Is he going to regress? I just don't know because the Saints actually have a pretty good midfield group.
Yeah.
Where's he actually going to play in that side? I'm not sure. He could get back status back, so he might be worth holding. But if you're doing that and he just continues being an 82 average, it's just a waste of a keeper.
I just don't see St Kilda chasing him as a defender after his year last year. So I think they would pick him up thinking he's going to play midfield because their midfield did really struggle a fair bit last year. They just was like the top end's really good, but they just didn't have the depth I think that they needed.
Yeah.
So I reckon he's come in there to bolster that. I think he's going to play midfield. I don't think he's getting that back status back just because I can't see him replacing anyone in that St Kilda backline really anyway.
Yeah.
I think he's coming to a midfielder. And for me, mid-6, mid-7, like if you play that deep, going to be handy there for sure. Probably mid-5 as well, actually. I'm probably being a bit harsh. But before that, I wouldn't be going too hard at him.
But what's he going to average? Is he going to average more than 82?
No. He's going to be around the 80 mark.
Yeah, which hurts. It's a hurt to keep. Lewis Taylor is mid-only. Really just unrosterable. Really, his PB was 77. He's at Sydney now as a mid-only. You can't touch him.
What's annoying about these is because they base that on his NEFL numbers. Yeah. So I reckon he will probably get forward status back. But even as a forward, I don't think he's fantasy relevant.
No, he's got nothing for you.
Yeah.
And the last one on the list is Aaron Norton. So he is forward only. Was a back forward last year. Definitely hurts with the versatility in an individual's team, but I think there's going to be a bias for him regardless. Can really turn it on, can score big. If the Bulldogs keep rising up, keep building, I think that he could be a really, really important fantasy player and could be a really good forward option who always, can jump in the ruck, get up the ground, a bit of a Nick Riewoldt hybrid. So haven't really lost out too much with Norton, I don't think.
Yeah, I just don't draft key forwards unless they're Jeremy Finlayson, who you draft as a defender who turns into a key forward. So yeah.
Whereas I love Aaron Norton and keep him. So that's the list of all the guys who we think are relevant or have kind of lost their DPP status. Some hurt, some aren't too bad. But once all the positions are released, go through it and see if you can get the upper hand on a few of your coaches.
All right, thanks for going through those, Kaes. We're going to jump straight into, talking about our new membership setup we got going from our website. So basically what we wanted to create is what we'd always been looking for, in fantasy resources. So we didn't want to have to dig through, every week of NEFL stats or every week of under 18 stats to find out who the best scorers we were. We wanted a place online that we could go to and see, your state league fantasy scorers, the fringe players that are scoring well, or the draftees that look like they're good fantasy scorers at the underage level in their underage clubs that could move into a fantasy role at AFL level. So we created that and I guess we use it to kind of support our podcast. And if you'd like to support our podcast, you could sign up for a membership, gain access to all those stats. So we mentioned the draftee scores and the stately scores, but we've also got the breakout tracker and Kaes and mine. Our draft rankings are also coming up early next year as well. So every dollar we make goes back into the pod to make it bigger and better. We don't pocket any of it. It's all going back into websites, data analysis tools, hosting, all that sort of stuff that costs us a fair bit of money to run. So we just do it for the love of it basically. And each week we like to talk about, mention a few gold members, but because we've had so many sign up, it's hard to read about them all at once. So we're just going to go through another 5 this week. So thank you to the following. Kaes, I'm going to let you read it out this week.
Thanks, Heff. But more importantly, thanks to Sean, James Bellett, Luke Matrokia, Mike Warren.
Matarokia, I'm going to go with.
Matarokia. Sorry, Luke, if I've butchered your name.
I probably butchered it too.
Or if Heff butchered your name. We'll just butcher it 2 ways. It's nice.
Yeah.
Mike Warren and Stuart Churton. So thanks to you guys. I really appreciate support.
Okay, let's move on to the iTunes reviews. So yeah, I guess we like to read out an iTunes review every now and then as well. But yeah, if you like the podcast, consider just writing a review, maybe giving us a cheeky 5 stars, because it just helps us be found on iTunes and podcast, get the name out there. This week we got a review from We Got Big Cox, who is if you're a fantasy football follower, you've noticed him around Twitter. He's commenting on everything. He loves his fantasy football. So cheers for giving us a shout out, mate. But he's written essential listening for deep keeper leagues. No one else talks about the untried and untested players. Have a listen if you want an edge in your league.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Thanks, Big Cox. All right, now we'll move on to the listener tweets. All right, Kaes. First tweet is from Ryan Arms. So he's asking, what will B. Ellis's role be at his new club?
Well, I think he's obviously going to play in the midfield for sure. I actually think he's going to be a bit of a big dog in their midfield. I think they brought him in there for a reason. You know, he left Richmond, who are probably going to win down the flag this year, for a bit of cash. I think he works really hard, so I think that he's going to want to kind of take a bit of ownership of that midfield there. So my question is, I'm not sure whether he'll attend a lot of centre bounces or not, or whether he's just going to be kind of that wingman who basically plays as a full-time mid. But I just think he could be up for some huge numbers next year.
I think the latter is, the wingman style is what he's going to play. My worry is, I guess, is he going to cope with the attention of being the big dog as well?
Good question. But I feel if he's not actually starting in the centre, it's going to help him a lot. So
so
that might be how they free him up.
Yeah, so do I. But they probably will be looking at him a lot more, and not having 3 or 4 other midfielders feeding him as well.
Yeah, true. But I still think he's going to be a great scorer.
All right, cool.
At Russ2468, Zaharakis is still mid only in AFL fantasy. So what are the chances of UF giving him back status? Given his recent surgeries, I'm only going to keep him if he gets that DPP.
Yeah, I think there is a fair chance. He got the defender status last year, didn't he, at the end of the year? And I just can't remember. I didn't really take note of the last few Essendon games. Did he play defence in that final?
He was playing that sweeper role.
Yeah.
That's where he finished up the season.
Yeah.
I'm just worried about his actual injuries. So if you look through all the guys, don't get sucked into guys who have been injured in the preseason, because they end up having stinker years, especially with Zaharakis, who's pushing 30. If he's playing that halfback role, it's not necessarily super fantasy friendly. I wouldn't keep him purely because of what's going on with his injuries at the moment.
You wouldn't keep him as a defender? Well, I guess he's only mid only, but if he gets named as a defender, which he probably will.
Yes, you probably would, but I'd be shocked if he really dominated.
Yeah, I can just see that handy. Like for defender, I just aim for some guy who can get me 80. Like I'm really happy with that.
Firstly.
Yeah, I know, but I think he will. Like I don't know, he did a fair bit last year. I guess he got injured. No, he did get injured. I don't know. But what I'm really thinking is I just can't see him moving back in the midfield at all. So if he is playing, he's going to be a defender.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And it might end up being like a long-term hold as a defender too.
Yeah.
You might be sacrificing some scores this year for some fruit in the next couple.
Yep.
At Trav014, can Gaz be in the top forwards again this year?
Yeah, I think he'll probably do pretty similar to what he did this year. I think he's found his little niche up forward.
Yep.
Probably he was already on the decline last year, but any kind of little midfield run, I think, is going to be pretty much wiped out. I think, and it's going to be that forward thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, wiped out, but it'll be reduced, I think, further. But I think you can rely on him for a few goals as well, and he's pretty dangerous. Yeah. I don't know. I'm reckoning this the same average as last year.
Because I was interested. He averaged 88 last year as a forward, which is pretty good, and I think he came home as his last 5 games are in the 100 average. So he's just that player who can just rack him up. He's got that hunger to find the ball and get those disposals.
If Geelong are in the hunt, he's probably going to be pretty hungry. Mm-hmm. But you've just got to hope he doesn't get injured as well.
Yeah, risk, but plenty of reward at the same time.
All right, at Henry Katz, Wingard and Zeeble both held forward status. Forward options are looking thin this year, but does the question over their role make them too risky to start the season with? I think I could get a solid return for them pre-season. Do you trade now or hold? Or if you only trade one, which one?
Tough question. I actually kind of feel that Zeeble is the better hold between the two. So Zeeble scored 9 tons this year and Wingard only had 3. For me, that Zeeble is a bit more consistent and has more chance of running through the guts permanently, I think, than Wingard does. Yes, there's a bit of age gap between the two, but I would keep Zeeble on that basis because I think that he might be called upon to go into that midfield a bit more next year still. But for the other side of the question, I actually don't think there's much point trading now. I'd wait and hold because their values are only going to rise if they have good pre-seasons or rise if they start the season well. I don't think trading now is really going to help you out too much because I'm not sure what you get in return for either of them.
Surprise, surprise, I think exactly the opposite. Apart from the trading now, I agree with that. Don't trade now. Wait until, see what happens. But
50-50 is not too bad.
But on the two of them, I guess, Wingard had pretty much no preseason last year. Really took a while to get warmed up. And towards the end of the year, they were playing him in the midfield, and he looked pretty damn hot going forward. Just being the age he is in comparison to Zeeble, Wingard's definitely the one I hold on to out of those two, just based on that. And, I think, and I'm basing this on not a lot, but just a gut feel, I think Wingard is going to explode at Hawthorn this year and just kind of get back to what he was in the early days at Port, just because I think it's just I need another player just to rub it in my face at what Port have done in regards of trading and things like that.
Bet number 2 for the night is Wingard v Zeeble.
Yeah, basically.
It's exciting.
Yeah, there we go. We can put one on that too. Yep.
Sweet.
Cool.
Next one from @JamesPlaysFS. Apparently, Perryman's a mid only now. Yes, correct. Worth a keeper spot in the hope he regains back status. So we'll just reflect on what we were talking about before with him.
Yeah, so basically, I just think there's too many GWS midfielders for him to play there permanently. He's going to have to play somewhere else, and it's going to be in defence.
So list them. Who's in the GWS midfield?
All right, so you got Kelly, you got Whitfield, Taranto, Canelio, Ward, Hopper, Haley, Caldwell.
To an extent.
That's 8 there, basically. And, I agree that is to an extent. But, again, if you go by the early best 22s, they've got Caldwell in there. So, I'm surprised. I'm still baffled he got back status taken away, to be honest. But, I reckon he'll win it back pretty soon.
Yeah, I think he would too.
Yeah,
after thinking about that a lot more.
Yep. All right. I'll let you answer this one because it's about Jordan Dawson. I'm sick of talking about him. So at Hutcho180, how relevant is Jordan Dawson now that he is back forward? Should he be in the first 3 or 4? Be an FCU take?
Well, for me, I think firstly you only take him as a defender. I always feel that defenders are more important than forwards. You always can feel you can get a few more cheap forwards, but regardless, I'd be playing him in defence or drafting him in defence if it was my team. But I reckon for me, he's probably a D2 to D3. So you're probably looking to take him a bit earlier than that in a way. Depending on where all your defenders fall, obviously we haven't got the full list of, exactly who's got defender status in Ultimate, and I haven't done my rankings or anything like that yet, but you probably got to think he's in that, 13 to 24 bracket of the defenders next year, wouldn't you?
He's going to be up there. I just look at the forward pool though as well. I think it's a bit light on this year, so I think he's going to be valuable just in both. And I think as a player that you can just swing both ways depending on what you've got, I think that makes him even extra more valuable. D2, F2, is that a bit high? I don't know. He kind of falls in between 2 and 3 for me.
But as you said, he's got that dual status, so he probably has to go up your ranks a bit in that way. Yeah,
probably. Yeah, it's a tricky one. But, look, I rate him highly. I feel like I'm biased talking about him here.
There is still a bit of risk involved, though. He's had, a bit of a good season for Sydney.
Yeah.
I do agree with that. It's a small sample size to go full chips in on, so maybe D2, D3 is a bit high.
Yeah.
You're probably right, D3 or 4, F3 or 4. It's going to be a really tough one to figure out where he goes in drafts or redrafts or that kind of thing.
He should be okay. It's just the horse factor. Then having a breakout year, then coming out and I think again he plays his best footy in the midfield. Does he get that midfield time? A few young midfielders coming in for Sydney, a side that wants to rebuild. Oh, it's a bit of a tricky one, but I think you've just got to take the risk. It's one of those plays you've got to invest in. If it pays off, great.
Yeah, you look
if
like
it doesn't, it's not the end of the world.
At Wezo2001, is Menegola a keeper now? He's mid only. Not sure where he sits in Geelong's 22. He's in a 12-team league and they keep 13 players. Heff, you're a Menegola man.
So I guess if you just watched his finals, you notice he played, most of the final series in defence. So let's just hope that continues, I think, because he was probably one of the better users of the ball coming out of defence throughout the finals campaign, and he was scoring really well too. I think if Menegola holds that role, I think we'll be fine. So I reckon with your keepers, you're keeping 13. I reckon he might just scrape into your 13th, depending on how many, what else you've got in terms of, midfielders and potentially defenders, because I reckon he could be a pretty handy defender if he gets that back status.
For me, it's going to depend on when you lock in your keepers and that kind of thing. I think he's one you really want to monitor in the pre-season if you can.
Yeah.
Because
See what role he's playing.
Exactly. He's
probably going to be injured for the whole pre-season though, so.
Well, that's not good then. They'll list him. From Facebook, Harley Phillip. Who are the best players to keep?
I think it's Philp, Kaes.
Philp.
There's no I in there.
I honestly can't read.
There was a Philp that was drafted this year, I think, as well. You know, if I wonder if there's a relation thing with the Carlton.
Interesting.
Sam Philp. Anyway.
Who are the best players to keep or retain their DPP status from last season? So a few guys who we were surprised by in a way.
Well, when I think about it, it's not that surprising. But Dan Houston, because he played a lot of midfield last year, but he kept kind of pushing back. And towards the end of the season, he was back in Port's defence. But so I guess it's a bit surprising in that regard. But I think it's fair that he kept it. Just listening to an interview he did this week as well, he is really eyeing off a midfield spot this season at Port Adelaide. So Dan Houston owners, get excited, because I reckon he's going to be
a gun.
Yeah, absolutely smash fantasy this year. The other one I thought was probably a little bit surprising. I guess the best players that retained it. I guess Wayne Miller, he could have added anything really last year, because I wouldn't have been surprised if he was a centre forward over a centre back. He kept floating between those two different roles. So he's lucky to retain it. So he's one of the better players that have retained. What do you reckon, Kaes?
For me, Darcy McPherson kept centre forward status, which is super handy for my team. But he was playing a lot in the midfield for Gold Coast. So very surprised he kept.
Yeah, actually, I'm really surprised at that one. Didn't realise that happened.
Yeah, so I'm licking my lips. Paddy Lipinski was kept his forward status too. He did kick a lot of goals and was up around that forward line. But, seeing as some of the guys who lost their forward status this year, good to see him keep it for another year. Another one that still baffles me today is how Lachie Whitfield is a centre forward. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, well, I guess he started a lot of games there, and AFL Fantasy is a bit more frivolous with their positions that they give out. So I guess he spent a bit of time there because he'd start from the centre bounce in the forward line and then push in the midfield. It's just weird.
It's weird.
Yeah.
If anything, he should be a mid only or retain that back, because there's zero backs now.
I would say mid only, but yeah. Anyway, last question of the night comes from Lockie Burns. So not directly related to positions, but who are some of the breakouts that we were a year early on? Example, everyone had Wayne Miller breaking out this year, but it looks like 2020 might be it for him. Now, are there any other breakout contenders that people might have forgotten about?
Yeah, so I kind of always look back at the guys who were injured this year, who were talked about a lot in this preseason, and then just kind of fell by the wayside because of some niggling injuries. So I mentioned it before. I think Jack Bowes is up for a good one. So is Ben Ainsworth. There's been a lot of talk about his preseason so far. As I said, I think those two are the guys who are ready to go for Gold Coast. Already talked about Andrew Brayshaw, Adam Chera. They were kind of hyped, and then everyone kind of went real cold on them, but obviously their backs and forward status is there. Should see them bounce back for a good third-year breakout, not that second-year breakout, which we kind of thought might have happened a year early. One that's a bit more low-key is Jordan Ridley. So he was a bit of a talk around the pre-season, and early on he was playing some pretty good footy. Averaged 68 in the 6 games that he played for the Dons, then got injured as a defender. I think he's one that's going to go as a bit of a sleeper and drop down late.
Once he cements a spot, I think he's going to be a good scorer.
Yeah, I just hope that he's one of these 22 fit guys at Essendon, because they're the guys who are going to be playing early on for the Bombers. Aidan Bonar, another one to an extent, who's kind of gone off the radar a bit, but I think his move to North could be positive, but who knows with the Kangaroos, but probably gets more opportunity at North Melbourne than he would have at Greater Western Sydney.
He scares me. I wouldn't like to draft him.
But would you be more likely to take a risk on him at the Kangaroos than at the Giants?
Absolutely.
Yeah, see, that's the point. Jackson Hately is another one, I think. He was very unlucky not to play more games in 2019. His average was quite high when he did play, so that might kind of affect his ranks there, with people just drafting based on average. But for those guys who, a bit more focused on some of the bigger names, I think Hately's one that could sneak up and have a really good season 2020.
And what about Harry Morrison, Kaes? You were banging on about him all last pre-season.
Yeah, obviously his breakout's happening this season. Geez, I don't know.
Let's not even go there. Let's cross him off everyone's list. Don't fool our listeners.
Sometimes you get it wrong, Heff. Sometimes you get it wrong.
Yeah, sometimes. I know all about getting it wrong. Don't you worry. All right, that wraps up the show for this week. So, I hope you enjoyed the position changes. We're going to have a bit of a break over the holiday period, and we'll be back early next year, and we'll have basically weekly episodes from January all the way through to late August, heading into finals. So it really gets underway after the holiday period. So yeah, it should be a pretty exciting year for us. Anything else to add, Kaes?
No, everyone have a merry and safe Christmas, and yeah, get excited for fantasy in 2020.
All right, just before we go, hit us up on our socials at Keeper League Pod, basically everywhere: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Kaes, Instagram.
Still don't know what TikTok
everything.
is.
All right, so yeah, hit us up on our socials. We're putting out, we're trying to up our content game this year. Putting out lots of stuff to keep you guys entertained. So yeah, check out those, and yeah, cool. We'll talk to you next year.
See you guys.